I used to be terrified of mastering. I thought it was this dark art and that wizards in some studio somewhere blessed with golden ears would take my track and send it back and it would just sound great. But I was helped to overcome my fear of mastering by embracing one simple plugin, Izotope Ozone. I'm going to talk about my very simple mastering process and demonstrate it on a recent tension cue called Focus on the Fingerprints on my week 45 vlog check-in. What is happening, YouTube? This is Dave Croft. Welcome to week 45 of my 52 cues, where I am committing to writing at least one cue per week for the entire year and coming onto YouTube talking about the process, talking about things going on in my life, in the industry, or what we're going to be looking at today, some things under the hood and the production process. Kind of like last week where we talked about song form. This week, I'm digging into this specific cue and I'm actually going to demonstrate my mastering process kind of in real time for you guys. I have a light mastering chain on here, but I want to talk about Ozone. So like last week, there's not going to be a specific kind of vlog portion and a separate cue demonstration. It's all going to be all blended together. But I want to thank you for joining me. I'm so glad you found me. However you found me, maybe you're one of the 1,000 subscribers. I posted a video last week about this, having reached 1,000 subscribers. And like I said in that video, I know in the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge accomplishment as far as like YouTube mega channels with millions of subscribers and everything, but I'm really excited and I'm very appreciative, because if you're subscribed to this channel, that means you're probably a composer, or maybe you're into the production process, or maybe writing hip hop or whatever. But I firmly believe that together we are better. So I thank you for your continued support, as I thank the support of my Patreon patrons whose donations keeps this channel going. And we're going to be talking more about my Patreon at the end of the video. So like I said in the intro, I used to think that mastering was this kind of this dark voodoo that you really had to have either tens of thousands of dollars worth of gear or golden ears or a perfect studio to master your tracks. And I was really afraid of it. And I thought that the only way I could really get my tracks mastered were to send them off and spend money and wait and then have them sent back. And I think once upon a time, when all of the mastering process was done with hardware, then that was probably true. But with DAWs and plugins, the mastering process has never been easier. And what really helped me along with my mastering journey was embracing Izotope Ozone. And Ozone used to kind of get a bad rap, because I think it was in the way that Ozone was marketed. It was marketed with using all the smart tools or all of the presets, and it has a ton of really good presets, but it was kind of marketed as kind of a one-button wonder. And I don't think that's really doing it justice, because under the hood, Ozone is a turnkey plugin, which means it's one plugin that has nearly all of the components that need to live on a mastering chain. And if you know me, you know I love simple solutions that work well out of the box, that aren't overly complicated, with a good balance of visual for visual learners and tactile feels for any kind of kinesthetic kind of learning, and isn't overly complex UI. And for an old fogey like me, Ozone really fit the bill. And I like that it is just one plugin that lives on my output bus, my stereo output. Now, at the beginning, I want to say I am not sponsored by Izotope. I pay full price just like anybody else. I may have gotten an educational discount once upon a time. I don't have the latest. Well, I have Ozone 9, and I think they just came out with like RX 9. I haven't updated that. But we're going to look at my ozone process, and I learned this through a series of videos on Mac Pro Video. Actually, I think it was Ozone 6 is when I really jumped in. And I'll try to dig up the link to that ozone tutorial, because it was essentially how to use ozone, but what it was really doing and what was really teaching me was mastering concepts using ozone and how ozone kind of fits each of the building blocks of the mastering process. So let's take a look at Focus on the Fingerprints, which, like I said, has a simple mastering chain on it. And it's just got a simple EQ, an adaptive limiter, and a multimeter. But I'm going to mute those out, and I am going to load in actually a couple of plugins. Actually, we'll use a preset that I have loaded here, where I load in not only my ozone mastering chain, but my stereo headphones plugin, which I've talked about before. And again, and this plugin, the headphones plugin, offsets the bias of my headphones, so they will sound great while I'm doing this live. So like I said, Ozone is one plugin that lives on your stereo out, and it encompasses or includes nearly all of the plugins that you would find on a mastering chain. But my mastering chain looks like this. And this is an initialized patch that I created. I have a stereo equalizer. I have a low-end focus, which kind of shapes the transient of your low. It's like just a transient shaper, but specifically for low end. A dynamic compressor, a stereo or an exciter, which is a series of distortion, and it's multiband. A stereo imager, which is a multi-band imaging, so I can, and I'm going to talk about each one of these components and how I use them. Another second stereo, which I have set to mid-side, and then the maximizer, which is a limiter, a compressor. And so I'm going to look at each of these components and talk about how I incorporate them. And if you are like a heavy-duty mastering guru, first of all, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. These are just the methods that I use that I've had some pretty good success with, and it's not overly complicated, and your mileage may vary. But I would love to hear from you guys in the comments, because I'm always looking to learn and improve. So the first thing I'm going to do in my mix is I'm going to find kind of the loudest portion of my mix where everything's all cooking along. And that's probably going to be right here. Usually it's right up at the button. And I'm going to go ahead and cycle this region here, and it sounds like this. Now, before I apply my mastering chain, I like to have about 4 dB of headroom, so the peaks are reaching about -4. This is going to enable our mastering to really sink in, because we're going to be putting a limiter on here, unlike throwing a limiter like on a snare track, we're not looking to get the levels below a certain threshold. We're going to use the limiter. Ozone's called a maximizer. We're going to use that to push up to a certain target loudness. In my case, the client, the publisher this is going for, they're looking for -11 LUFS, which is loud, but the client wants it, the client gets it. All right, so this is going to be our loudest sustained portion of the cue. This is where it is the loudest. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of listen through some EQs. I'm using both visual and my ears, and knowing that it might sound a little dark for you because I'm listening through my Sony MDR 7506s. All right, so I'm just kind of looking. I feel like we need a little bit here. And one of the things I like about Ozone is you hold down Option and you can isolate certain frequencies. I don't think I can make this any bigger. No. I'm going to give a little bit of lift here. And one thing I like about Ozone is the scale. With mastering EQs, you really shouldn't, overdo. They shouldn't be doing giant 5, 6, 7 dB boosting cuts on the mastering chain. You need to be a lot more subtle with it. And so I love the scale. Like this is only 4 dB here, right? This scale, I looks like a giant boost, but that's only 5 dB. If I pull up like Logic, this is a 4.8 dB boost, and look, that doesn't look like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it really, really is. And so I love how the scale of Ozone's EQ, the dB scale here, I think is right on point, because you don't want to put giant boosting cuts on a mastering chain. So I'm going to give a little bit of lift here, use my scroll wheel to isolate it. All right, so let's start with that. The next thing I'm going to do is do this low end focus. I'm going to do a listen here. And do I want the transients of my low end to be kind of smooth and rolling, or do I want them the transients to be a little bit sharper? So I think I want them to be sharper so that synth pulse in the bottom can kind of come through. And I kind of roll this down, and it might be really, really tough to hear here. I'm rolling it until I can really just feel kind of the whump of it. Yeah, I feel like the whump, the 134 hertz and below, is really. That's with it. This is without it. Yeah, it just really helps to kind of focus that. All right. Next, my multi-band compressor. And here, I'm going to hit play and click on a Learn button here. And what this will do is, this is Izotope's Learning AI. And it's looking for crossovers. And I find that it does a good job, like 90% of the time. So now I'm going to solo this. You can see I have a lot of energy, and I do not use a ton of overly compressed sounds here. I'm just, or rather, I use a really light touch here. So it's only 2:1. Set my ceiling to about -1.5. This is just shaving off those top transients, so nothing's popping through the mix a little bit too bad. Again, my limiter reached the ceiling there of -1.5. Shave the top transients. I'm going to give a little bit of gain to these highs. I'm actually going to pull that down just a little bit. See if I still like this. Yep, I dig that. And now up to my highs. All right, so that is my dynamic compression. Notice it's all really super simple, 2:1. Pretty moderate attack, moderate release. You know, the knee, I don't really get into all of that. I just leave it super simple because I'm just smoothing some things out. Now I'm going to open up my exciter. I'm going to hit play, click on Learn. It's finding all the crossovers. They should be really similar here. And now I'm going to apply some light distortion to each of these. And on and I have all different kinds of distortion profiles. I like the warm here, either warm or analog on my low end. I have the amount of distortion and the mix of the distortion. All right, let's get the mids here. Bring that up just a little bit. I did that because it was pulling a little bit too much from the low end. Not much, but just a little bit. And let's try this. Let's try just like a tape saturation versus like a tube. I like the tube here. Okay. Next, I love putting tape saturation on my mids or my mid highs. I think it just really helps everything to kind of pop out. And then I will either use tape saturation or this retro, which is a little bit sparklier. All right. One of the features of Ozone that I really, really like is this bypass, and I can gain match, which it will bring the levels up to my mastered sound, or rather when I bypass the plugin, it will boost the levels so that you don't get the disparity of volume between the mastered and the unmastered. All right, so that is unmastered. So you can really hear things starting to take shape. And it's really not a lot to it. It's very, very simple. Next, my imager, which is kind of like the exciter in that it's multi-band, but I'm going to solo and look through each one. Let's go ahead and click on Learn. All right. And what we have here is essentially our phase correlation, which tells us kind of how wide it feels. And as long as we're somewhere in between 0 and +1-ish most of the time, we're really okay. So if we look at our low end, your low end should really favor the +1 in general. We can look at the different displays of what the stereo image looks like. And you can see the majority of the signal is coming through the middle, and we have some elements kind of popping out to the side, which is okay. So I'm gonna leave that guy right there. What I don't do and what I don't need to do is I don't want to like bring that right down the center. Right? If anything, maybe clean up. Yeah, let's go ahead and narrow it just a little bit. So it's it's like bouncing between 0 and +1, but it's hugging the +1. So we'll try that. All right. Now my mids. Snake that up there. That's really pretty wide. Let's leave that guy there. And kind of the higher you get, the more you can get away with the width. Let's look at our polar levels here. Yeah. So it started out kind of wide, and then it got a little bit centered. It's like right down the middle. I'm going to widen that out just a little bit more. All right, let's do a bypass. All right, and then I do a second equalization pass. a second equalization pass that I use mid-side EQ on. All right, so the mids, this represents kind of what's coming through the center channel. And I will scoop out right around in here between, 1K and 6K-ish, and just scoop this out. The specific frequency is like 2.3K, but this is just to help get it out of the way of the dialogue. So I'm going to pull this out, and here it is. So I'm going to pull out right there, and then on my sides, I am going to push it. So I scooped it out on my mids and then boost it on my sides. And I'm also going to just trim off a little bit to make sure that there's not any real low end, any sub frequencies going to the sides that can really futz with like subwoofer crossovers and all of that. So I get the really, really lows out of the sides almost all together. Let's see what else we need here. Give a little bit of that. Give a little bit of that. Offset. And again, I treat these kind of like complementary. So if I boost 500 hertz on my mids, then I'm going to notch. Not always. Like here, I think I'm going to boost a little bit. Let me go back to soloing the sides. Give a little bit of that. A little bit of a high shelf at about 8K, almost 9K. Check the bypass. And that brings me to my maximizer, which is a compressor, which is a limiter. My ceiling is at -1 dB, and I have several different profiles here on the left. I almost always keep it to the IRC LL. I just think that just works. I don't get into all the stereo independence character. I leave it at 2. I'm keeping an eye on my target LUFS, which right now is at -18, and I'm going to pull my threshold down until my LUFS get to -11, and you can see it really kicking in. Now I might have a little bit too much headroom. By the way, you're seeing me go onto the red here on my stereo out. That's because of my headphone plug-in. So let's back it up just a little bit. I've got my threshold pulled way back, and I feel like I might have a little bit too much headroom. So instead of remixing everything, I'm just going to juice up the gain here just a little bit, because it starts at unity there. Or actually, I don't think it's at, yeah, it is at unity. So I'm going to give it about 2 dB. Actually, let's do like 1. Which means I won't have to push my limiter too hard. All right, so now that I'm in my target LUFS, I'm going to sample some of these other presets here, or these modes rather. The IRC4 Modern, IRC4 Transient, Classic, LL. I think I like the Modern the best. And so now we can go back to our bypass. So that is unmastered. And that is mastered with And so now I'm going to listen to the whole thing here. And some things might have popped up in the mix from when before. So I'm listening for things that might pop up in the mix that have now kind of revealed themselves now that the mastering chain is plugged in. So I might do some light tweaking. Tuck that down in my EQ. So without mastering chain, with the mastering chain. You know, I don't think I need that anymore. Let's take some of that low end out. And then we're mastered. That's essentially my entire mastering process of all of the tracks that I've submitted and all of the tracks that I've published. I think only 2 I didn't do my own mastering pass on. And I do this same mastering process for nearly every single track. So now, with all that in mind, I'm going to turn off my Sound ID reference, and this is going to sound super bright. It's going to sound super bright to me, but this should sound very, very balanced, especially to you if you're not wearing MDR 7506 headphones. And we're going to take a listen to this, focus on the fingerprints, and then we'll do a deeper dive into the compositional aspects of the cue and just do a brief overview of this. But let's take a complete listen to Focus on the Fingerprints now with the full master. was Focus on the Fingerprints, now with a fresh new coat of mastering. This is a light tension cue, an intrigue tension cue written specifically for a client request looking for an album of intrigue tension, which to me means standard light tension type of form, melodic energy, rhythmic kind of synth undercurrents. But the intrigue part means it's not too dark, and that usually means getting me into Dorian mode, which this melody is in E flat Dorian mode, which means C naturals instead of C flats. E flat major would have that C flat in it. So it starts out just by stating the melody. This is piano, a noir piano, layering in east-west harp. Then harp with the octaves, then the next phrase, continuing, and then the piano octave, a harp an octave below, this all building. This is everything I talked about last week as far as song form and adding layers. And so in this case, as we are pushing energy into our breakdown, not only did I add a harp octave below, but I added halfway through the phrase a harmonic layer. So these fifths that are going on. Then I have a couple of textures, some pads happening. This is an omnisphere, really kind of breathy, with a low piano for my low end. Some pads and swells from omnisphere. Typically at the phrase points, introducing a low pulse, another omnisphere, with a low marimba. Now there's actually there's a marimba line that I've hidden in my B section, and the reason I hid it is because, and it sounds like this. I'll go ahead and play it for you in my B section. The reason I hid it is because I wrote another cue for this album which uses almost that exact same type of a lick, and so I had to fill out this lo-fi bell here, and that's why there's a low marimba but not a high marimba. Usually I'll have complementary marimba parts happening, but I realized, hey, I kind of copied myself, bringing in some pulses. Very kind of guitar. It's another omnisphere patch. And then a phrase later, bringing in this kind of almost Western twang guitar kind of sound, and those kind of work together. I think I'm going to put that right there. A little bit of harmonic motion. You know, with light tension cues, you're going to hang out on one chord for a really long time, and then use some harmonic motion at some point to kind of ramp up the tension. And so that builds. And then as the tension starts ramping up, I have these percussion sticks, which is actually an omnisphere patch. Some kicks. So we have a little bit of light groove. I almost always put some kind of drum beat in my light tension cues with a double tracked shaker left and right, just an egg. And then because it's a tension cue, I recorded several of my own bowed cymbals. Drench it in reverb and some delay, and you get these really, really creepy but effective swells and little tension pieces that are at every phrase. So every phrase has one of these. And because I recorded my own, each one's unique, and I could choose, depending on where we were in the phrase, how much I wanted to dig in with the bow. one. There's another one. So this is all building and layering, a little bit of harmonic motion here, and it eventually all leads to my breakdown. You could hear that cymbal right there. Wow, that's really up there. And all those overtones that came out of that cymbal, and you can see them light up. Really, really nice. All right, bring in a secondary pulse. And a secondary melodic instrument in this kind of lo-fi bell, which is doing a fragment of the melody here. Here it is. Right, that bum 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 bum. That's the primary melodic motive. But just hinting at it. Then energy bringing back the primary melody. Now, the only thing I don't have in this arrangement is a little vacuum moment, a little edit point. That might be a note I get from the library. Then everything all coming together here at the end, which is essentially this layer, but I've brought in elements from my, or at least this secondary melodic sound from my B section. So we have kind of A, B, A plus B. All builds to my button, and that's the final chord. Now, one difference is this melody here into my breakdown. It ends on that 2 2nd scale degree, just kind of floating out into space. I didn't think I could get away with that, so I resolve it. So it actually lands on the tonic. It ends on tonic. And that's essentially focus on the fingerprints. I feel like over the course of the entire year, I'm just unloading all of my secrets. You know, by the end of this, year, you're gonna know everything about my entire compositional process, and just shared with you my mastering process. I would love to hear from you and your mastering process, and if you use Ozone and how you use it. Do you use it differently? And I've really, really enjoyed using Ozone. I feel like it kind of demystified the whole mastering process for me. So like I said at the beginning, this channel would not be possible without the support of my Patreon patrons. So don't thank me, thank them. They actually give their actual money to help keep this channel afloat. Patreon, to be a patron, it's just $1 a month, and all of my patrons get access to my music production live streams that happen every single week. So that's going to do it for me for week 45. I hope that you had a fantastic week 45, and I hope you will have a great week 46. Once again, thank you to my 1,000, now 1,020 something subscribers. Thank you guys so much, but that's going to do it for me this week. Until next time, peace.